Hello and welcome to today's edition of Extraordinary Outcomes. I'm Shubhanjan Sarkar, your host and founder of Pitchling, the buyer-seller engagement platform. We continue our series of conversations with authors who wrote seminal books on sales that helps us understand the buyer better. Today we speak with Lisa Magnussen about her book, The Top Sales Leader Playbook: How to Win 5x Deals Repeatedly. Lisa Magnussen has walked in the shoes of sales leaders. She was an award winning sales manager and led the charge as a sales VP for several sales organizations across a variety of geographies, including executive positions with Fortune 50 companies across a broad spectrum of industries, including technology, software, security, healthcare, medical device, insurance, and manufacturing. Lisa has worked with senior sales leaders and their teams to achieve phenomenal results, especially in the area of big account wins. Lisa also founded and facilitated the Sales Executive Mastermind Group for sales VPs in the Pacific Northwest. She conducted one on one interviews with 41 sales executives, CROs, sales VPs, and directors as part of her research for this book. Now, on to this insightful episode with Lisa Magnussen. Lisa, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thrilled to be on the show.
So let's start at the beginning. You're not new, neither are you new to sales, nor are you a new author. Why did you have the compulsion to write this new book?
Well, I have spent my entire career in sales and sales leadership, and for the past 15 years as a sales consultant. And one of what compelled me to write this book is that in working with sales leaders and business leaders, I felt like there was this need to sort of codify how those groups organize themselves to go after truly, truly large deals. I call them 5X deals, meaning about 5 times your average deal size. And so that was really at the core is a desire to sort of codify that so that more people could participate in having a big deal culture.
So would you say then that this book was specifically targeted at enterprise sales with large annual account value?
Yes, but also it can apply to, the mid-market or even small companies. It really is for the leadership team. So the general company leadership team, the sales leadership team, the VP of sales, directors, sales managers, and big account quarterbacks as well. But any size company that has the ability to go after and develop and cultivate and win a big deal, a 5X deal. And the reason why it's important to differentiate is because you have to do different things for those kinds of opportunities. It's not the same as your normal sales process. And that's what the book is about. It's 16 plays that are plays associated with what leaders and account teams and account quarterbacks need to do differently.
So as you were training salespeople or you're talking to sales organizations and leaders in the sales organization, you sort of saw the need. Either they were not focused on something that they could have achieved, or they were coming and asking you something that, hey Lisa, how do we increase the size of our deal? So where did it lie actually? What triggered this?
Yeah, well, my practice is a little bit different in that I have spent my entire career in the trenches. And even as a consultant, I am in the trenches with my clients. So what that looks like is, yes, I do offer training, I offer, consulting, but I also offer what I call my war room services. And that is aligning with account teams and helping them identify, develop, and close big deals. So I am literally in the trenches with them day in and day out. And so, I'm helping them prepare for finalist presentations. I'm going through that RFP process with them if they have to do that. I'm helping them score their opportunities. I'm helping them identify who should be on the account team and what the roles are. I'm sort of that external expert and facilitator. And in many, many cases, I stay with that account team from the beginning all the way through to the end. So my desire to help kind of put all this in one place was born out of experience with what account teams struggle with, what sales organizations struggle with sort of trying to bring out the best practices when they do it right, when it's part of their culture, they can repeatedly win big deals. And then the ones that maybe have just won one or two, they've got one or two banner accounts. How do they do that repeatedly? How do they really bring those components into their sales organization so they can replicate that year after year? And what I found, I actually interviewed 41 sales VPs as part of my research for this book, live interviews, one-on-one. And I asked them about their goals, about their challenges, about their proficiency with large account selling, and all the components. And what I learned was sales leaders today, they have twice as many challenges as they do goals. And that wasn't totally surprising to me, but when you really dig into it, it just shows how distracted they can be because they have so many challenges associated with their goals. But the other thing that I learned is most sales leaders don't have a playbook, a sales leadership playbook. They have a sales playbook for their salespeople to follow, and they want their salespeople to follow that playbook because they understand that if they do, they're going to be more successful, easier to manage, common terminology, you can measure it, but they don't have a sales playbook that would yield all the exact same benefits for the sales leadership team. And so through those 41 interviews, that really shaped my thinking on what this book should be. So it truly is a sales leader playbook, and I wrote the book in exactly the manner that those 41 people told me that they would find valuable.
This is interesting because now you're saying that the sales leader's playbook trying to achieve the same goals should look different from the sales team's playbook, right?
Yes, 100%.
Yeah. So would you like to unpack that a bit, and can you use some examples to say how you sort of figured that and how does it look actually?
Yeah, absolutely. And so a sales playbook in most sales organizations looks like identifying, what is the sales process? What's the buyer's journey that goes along with that process? What are the tools and the resources for those stages? What are some artifacts or things that salespeople can use for each of those stages? That's a typical sales playbook. And most sales organizations have those, the ones that don't should. Absolutely proven that is a winning way to run your sales organization. Sales leadership playbook, and my playbook is geared around not just sales leadership in general, but how to really organize the sales leadership team to win these big deals is broken up into 4 parts. What sales leadership is needed, what methodology, in other words, the way we're going to go after these big opportunities, execution, how do you actually do the things that are important, and then culture. Does your company have a culture of winning big deals? And so specifics underneath, so the 16 plays fall under those 4 parts.
Right.
I'll give you an example,
Yeah.
like sales culture. Is the executive team, which is so much of your audience out there, it might be the CEO, the COO, the CFO, the CMO, are those people involved with the big deal process? And one play is just dedicated to, what does it look like when that's working?
Right.
Does your organization have a culture around win-loss retrospectives? So none of the plays are the same as you would find in a sales playbook. They're very different.
Got it. So most of us are into commoditized services, right? Which means we
Yeah.
have multiple competitors. Which
Yeah.
means that when a buyer is talking to us, it's most likely that the buyer is also talking to 3 or 4 of our competitors, right?
Absolutely.
It's very
Yep.
very likely, very likely. In a scenario like that, how do you actually identify these 5x deals, and how early do you think you should insert yourself into that process?
So, I mean, several of my plays, that's a great question. And several of my plays deal with that, but that kind of falls under the methodology. And,
Okay.
salespeople in general really don't like the word methodology. They don't like the word process.
Yeah, true.
So, but methodology, I couldn't find a better word for that part, because it's like, how do we do it when you have this 5X? Because it doesn't fit with their normal sales playbook. And that does not mean that all the components of the normal sales playbook, the regular deal playbook, you're still using those. But now you're using a lot more. You have an account team that's been designated by the sales leader and enabled. That's
Right.
one of the plays in the sales leadership section is designating and enabling the account quarterback. And then once you have this account team, they're going to march down this path. And it's probably going to start with scoring the opportunity. So in my book and the methodology, it goes through an extensive methodology with examples, samples, scoring being one of them, but scoring looking at a lot more than just the revenue potential. Looking at, is the account team committed to see this through? Maybe this might be 6 months, 9 months, 18 months.
Right.
Are they committed? I've worked with account teams. I worked with an account team recently, and we scored the opportunity, and it scored very well, but it scored very low on the customer's willingness to go all the way through their buying journey and also access to the customer. But everything else scored high. So the account team said, you know what, we think there's enough here. We want to put the time and the resources. And so we spent the first 2 to 3 months of our War Room strategy sessions literally trying to create emails that would just get a return call. And they had been doing this for 6 months prior to even engaging me. That's why they engaged me. It's like, we got to win one this year, and we can't get it done on our own. So, at one point I'm like, wow, this is really fundamental. And the VP goes, Lisa, we're just trying to rub 2 sticks together here to get a flame. I'm like, okay, fine. Well, and we got it done. We got a response. And then we got a meeting. And then we got more meetings. And we kept having our war room work, because every meeting was intense pre-call planning. We could not drop the ball. And in the background, we were doing things like, SWOTs, and you mentioned the competitors. We were doing competitive analysis and blocking, both preemptive and if needed, sort of defensive blocking as well. All of that was being mapped out in the background as we were engaging the customer in the foreground. And one of the things about these 5X deals, sometimes you have to go backwards to go forwards. All of a sudden now there's a committee and we have to do a relationship map for each member of that committee. And we have to go back to our research and really understand the disposition of each of those people. And again, more pre-call planning. Well, 9 months later, after we were rubbing those 2 sticks together, they won that deal. And that was a game changer for their company for the year. They only needed 1 per year, and that was their one. And now they still have that account. That's led them to another one.
Right.
So, these, and become a banner account for them. So it's worth the efforts when you win these, and they change the organization. So yes. Lots of work around competitors, and that is absolutely part of the methodology. Pardon the use of that word for the salespeople listening today.
How much will somebody reading the book be able to execute without Lisa around?
That's a great question, because yes, I love to be involved with my clients and with their deals, and I get as much gratification, I think, as they do when we go through this process and we win these deals and I see them, and I have a 95% return client rate, so then I get to work with them again and again, and
of course,
and stuff. But anybody can look at this playbook and make it their playbook. So it's each of the plays have, what is the play? What are the steps? One of the VPs that I interviewed said, as I was, kind of mapping out what the chapters were going to be and the parts and the plays, and she said to me, "Lisa, are you going to have yellow and red flags?" And I'm like, "Well, now I am, because that's the best idea I ever heard." So each of the plays, what is it? What are the steps? What are the yellow flags when it's not working? What are the red flags when it's really now not working? And what remedies can you put in place? And then there's tons of models and examples. So like scoring, there's an example of a scorecard in there. Relationship mapping, example of a relationship map. It's all in there. And every single one of the 16 plays has a sideline coach. So I literally searched the world for experts on each of the plays, and they lend their expertise to that play. So I've got 16 people from all over the globe. No one from India.
We're not very good at selling.
No, I'm sure that is not true. But I've got the UK, I've got Singapore, I've got all over the world, and the US, of course. But and these people weigh in with their expertise. It might be 3 or 4 paragraphs. This is a playbook. It's very easy to read. So they weigh in with a different perspective to add value to the play. So to answer your question, yes, somebody could read this book and they can absolutely have everything they need to go, how do we implement this in our organization? And I also will facilitate book clubs for folks. I've got an offer out there now around a book club offer. I also built templates. This is one of the things the VP said they wanted, that people can purchase on my website. So it's sort of a blank version of the playbook, and they can buy that. You can use that, get their team together. Maybe while they're reading the book, they're building their own version of the playbook. So lots of ways that people can, really embrace these concepts and make them work for their organization.
Wonderful. I was part of a webinar a couple of days back, and that webinar was talking about the buyer's journey. Mm-hmm. In fact, it was called "Who Moved My Buyer?" to the context that the buyer is not buying the same way today as they were buying, say, 10 years back, and that process is quite different from the way we try to define it from the sales perspective. It's sort of an independent thing. And the point that came out was that one of the biggest disappointments buyers have is after the sale closes, in the quality of the delivery that happens, and the transition from the salesperson to the delivery team and so on. So is this something that you think is critical for an organization to sustain a 5X sales culture?
Yes. As a matter of fact, one of the parts in the methodology talks about expansion and expansion opportunities. And Barbara Weaver Smith is my expert. She's the author of The Whale Hunters, very close colleague of mine. We've worked together for many years. She's the expert that talks about that transition and the pros and cons of different ways that companies make that transition. Some companies have the lead salesperson, maybe it's the account executive or the global account executive or the national account executive, and then there's a handoff to an account manager. And so she talks about the pros and cons associated with that versus having the account executive keep the account and the pros and cons associated with that, and offers sort of some really good thinking on maybe a hybrid version of that. But with these big accounts, you cannot win and sustain these 5X deals repeatedly without a rock solid way to make sure these clients are not only happy, that they need to be your best referrals. You need to be able to talk about them and do more business with them, expand them. So a lot of the work, the strategy work, it doesn't end when the contract gets signed at all. It continues on. It refreshes. I'll give you a short story. I was working with another client. This is my biggest win, actually, with one of my clients. And I've had some really big ones, but this is my biggest. Is I was working with this company, and they get big deals. It's kind of just based on what they sell. And we found out about this opportunity, and we were not poised to win it. It was not an existing customer. It was a new prospect. They had some negative perceptions of my client. They already were working with somebody they liked, and there were some geographical challenges. But we scored them, and kind of like the other example that I gave, it's like, you know what? We think there's enough here. We're going to put the resources. We're going to make the commitment. We're going to march forward. So we did. Similar to the other situation, tons of account strategy, especially competitive because they had that current provider that they really liked. So we had to overcome those challenges. We had to really, do a better job than the competitor. Went all the way through, orchestrated every single interaction, and they won that deal, $40 million. Wow. 40 million. So that was my biggest. I've done 30, I've done 20, 40, biggest. So satisfying, celebrations, whatever. But to your point, within 90 days, they did, because we didn't stop with our planning on winning the deal. It went through implementation. We were thinking about implementation way early in the process, because in order to overcome the geographical challenges and to unseat that competitor, we had to really paint the picture of what the implementation was going to look like. So we hit that so hard. Well, they did a great job implementing. Within 90 days, they had a referral for another brand new prospect like the one they had just landed, and now they're working on that. Crazy. $40 million plus next one.
Yeah.
So you're exactly right. You have to think about those things. You have to put the resources, and that is part of a solid strategy.
Wonderful. So I would, I don't want you to give away the book, obviously, in the sense in this podcast. But can you identify a few red flags that you have cautioned people while they're building their playbooks, whether for the leadership or for the sales methodology or for the culture? What kind of red flags have you sort of pointed to, which people really need to look out for?
Yeah, I mean, at a high level, some of the red flags are, the sales VP not being fully committed. Saying, hey, we're going to do this thing, and it becomes kind of a flavor of the month. Mm-hmm. Again, at a high level, when you're thinking about culture, the executive team is not backing up the sales leader to go after these, to create a culture around going after big deals. Because let's talk about this very specific. So what would that look like if the executive team wasn't committed? It would look like them just pummeling the sales leader and the sales organization for 30-day regular deals instead of understanding that, sure, you need to continue with your business, your normal business. That engine's got to be running. But if you want to add this 5X deal component, you want to do that repeatedly, sometimes that almost always that takes a different approach. Brian Burns, who's somewhat famous podcaster out of San Francisco, he's one of my experts, and he comments on, sometimes companies' leaders have to do things they don't want to do. Maybe they have to get outside of the fiscal year and say, we're going to protect commissions, territories, account assignments outside of that for these big deals. Or, our normal process might be a 30-day evaluation. For these big deals, that might need to be a 6-month, 9-month, and the executive team has to back that up, or we have to make some investments that we don't normally make, and the executive team has to back that up. So a red flag is, where you don't have the culture, which means the executive team isn't on board with doing the things that are absolutely required to go after these big deals, to maintain these accounts, like you pointed out earlier, and to get new ones. And those are some of the high level big flags. Lower level, the account team it's hard to stay with something over time. It's really hard. So you can have dysfunctionality, which can be a yellow flag that can turn into a red flag. People, it's like all of a sudden aren't showing up for the strategy meetings because they get bored. So there's I would say for each of those plays, the yellow and red flags, there's at least 5 yellow flags and red flags for every play.
Right. Got it.
Literally, it's this minefield or this battlefield that's just fraught with landmines.
Got it. As I said, I mean, we are all in a commodities business, all of us.
Yes.
So how effectively can you forecast? Because, I mean, if I read the literature and the research, people are missing forecast by miles.
Yes. Just with their normal business.
Yeah. So how do you, from your vantage point and with your vast experience, how do you see we are sort of getting this whole forecasting thing wrong, and how can we fix it?
So, in my world, the big deal world, I have to say that I don't spend a lot of time on forecasting. It's my clients would be doing that, but we don't spend much time talking about that. And, it's part of that culture to understand when you have these big deals, they take a long time. There's lots of people involved. Sometimes you have to back up to go forward. Sometimes there are stalls and stops that you don't want to see in your normal sales process, but you will see them in this big deal sales process. You just will. Committees get disbanded, have to be reformed. Executive sponsors move on. New executive sponsor comes forward. A lot can happen over months, during this sales process. So I think the reason why I don't spend a lot of time here with my clients is they have to manage that internally. And certainly in terms of forecasting, these deals probably aren't forecasted until they're very close to being done. It's you have that agreement, you understand the procurement process, the customer maybe has already said yes, and maybe that's when they get forecasted. But I have to say I'm not an expert on that, because that's, my time with my clients is helping them to get to that point. Sometimes when you get to a yes, it's another 3 months.
Right.
So if I was advising them on that, and I don't, and I'm not an expert on their forecasting process, I would say don't forecast these deals till you have an agreement from the customer, and then it's there. You still have to know a lot about their environment to know what month that contract is going to get signed.
Fair enough. I mean, actually, I was coming more from your. Not with context to the book, but from what you have seen and the fact that we get so much of the forecasting wrong.
Yes.
What do you think, if you step back and look at it, where do you think we are going wrong? I mean, that was the core question. Yes. Not so much with the book per se.
No, I understand. And I wasn't even speaking to the book, but more speaking to my practical experience. But here is one thing that I will tell you that I do talk to teams about is every time you have a strategy session, every time you do pre-call planning, every time you map out the strategy, every time you refresh the relationship chart, every time that you really dial in your win themes, you're improving your likelihood of success. You're increasing that percentage. And that is something we talk about all the time, because that is absolutely true. So people don't stumble on big deals. They don't, at least in my 30 plus year experience, they don't just come in and then you don't just get them. you have to have, yeah, that would be nice. But instead, you have to methodically, hence the methodology section of the book, methodically do all the things to keep increasing your likelihood of success. And the reason that's so inspiring to account teams is because they're like, okay, we're going to put this time into meet, and today we're going to work on win themes. It's like that's going to improve our likelihood of success. We just gained 10%, Next meeting, we're going to gain another 10%. And so eventually that adds up to, higher close rates, which is very exciting to management teams and specifically sales leadership teams.
Of course. So finally, what would you say would be the core thrust for some organization which is looking at a 5x deal? If you want to say that, okay, as an organization, you have to focus on one thing to build yourself towards a 5x culture, towards a 5x sales organization, this one thing you must do.
That's a great question. And so if you want to think about the one thing, to me, it's the account strategies. I call them war rooms. Sometimes, depending on where we are in the world, popular or not popular, but that's kind of, right. I've been doing that for years and years and years, so hard to come off of that. But the one thing is those account strategy, because it has a multiplier effect. So, if the book has 16 plays, and that's one of them, implementing your war room strategy, but if it has 16 plays, if you do the one, you make progress on so many of the others. Right. And so what does that look like? I mean, one of the things I have in the book is a sales leadership 12-month calendar with activities that you would want to see happening over a long period of time. So if you have those account strategies and they are every month for the whole year and the next year and the next year, you're going to figure out what that methodology is. You're going to do the pre-call planning, the account quarterback or coordinator. I was talking to somebody and from England, he goes, can you explain quarterback? We don't have football here. Or football's different here. Then I go, that focal point. Yeah. All those other things get figured out if you just commit to these accounts. What also gets figured out is the ones that aren't worth the time, So maybe you don't exactly use scoring. You should, but maybe you don't, which is, but you will figure it out just by putting that stake in the ground around the account strategy sessions. Right. So that's my one thing. That's my trust.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you, Lisa. I really enjoyed chatting with you.
Thank you. Me too.
Today, we speak with Melissa Madian, founder and chief fabulous officer at TMM Enablement Services Incorporated, about her book, Enabler? I Hardly Know Her.
Quite often, organizations will give their sellers, the product sheets. Here's the data sheet. Here's the product you're selling. Here are all the SKUs for those of you who are old school like myself and remember what SKUs are. And the challenge with that is, and the analogy I use in the book is, it's like you have a truck of produce and you're basically telling the sellers, today on the truck we have oranges, or today on the truck we have apples, today on the truck we have strawberries. But and that's the thing that it is, but there's nothing, a lot of organizations don't talk about, well, what do those oranges and those apples and those strawberries mean to the people buying them? And what is it going to solve for them? So when I go through the what am I selling book, part of the book, it's not the orange. It's what you're selling is, hey, customer, do you realize that vitamin C deficiency could result in scurvy? And that's essentially what you're selling. You're selling a healthier lifestyle and vitamin C intake so that your buyer doesn't get scurvy. And so I detail, in the book about how organizations need to think about not the bits that are on the truck, not the produce that's on the truck, but what does that produce bring to the buyers that you're targeting?
We will continue to explore the B2B conversion problem through additional episodes in our series, Fixing the 5% Conversion Problem in B2B Sales. You can still share what you think about this elephant in the sales room. Please use the link below to record your views in video, and we will continue to showcase them in our upcoming episodes. Let us listen to today's viewer response.
Hi, Shubhanjan. Thanks for inviting me into your show. Congratulations. You're doing a fantastic job. Now, for the sake of the audience, my name is MB Sam. I am the founder CEO of this advisory firm called Cusp Services, and we are exclusively focused on emerging enterprises based out of India. Now, coming to those two questions, let me try and take the first question in terms of what got us here. I think it goes back way back into our kindergarten system. And I'm sure you remember the only time we were allowed to open our mouths was when we had the answer, not when we had a question in our minds. And that continued. Look at all the mark certificates. Look at all the completion, certificate completion, and the trophies that we have. They were all recognition for the answers that we said or we wrote in our exam papers. And just when we thought that we escaped the education system and then we're getting into employment, look at what happens during all the employee onboarding programs, right? So the learning and development, the L&D team, that puts you through a very rigorous product session. And at the end of the session, they give you what is called as an FAQ, frequently asked questions. So at least in our education system, after the question, we were allowed to write our own answers, but the FAQs tell you not only the questions, but also the kind of answers that you're supposed to repeat in front of your customer. So again, we're continuously getting conditioned only in terms of giving the answers, show up and throw up in front of your customers. And that's one of the main reasons, according to me, why the B2B conversion is at an abysmal low. Now, coming to this question about what do I think that can fix it? Don't be alarmed. I'm not going to use the much maligned word called empathy. That comes much, much later. The thing that can fix this issue is this word called curiosity, not simple curiosity, childlike curiosity. Thanks for this opportunity for sharing this with you.
Time to wrap up for today. Remember, you will soon have access to the complete interviews and transcripts in the series. Keep an eye out for the link in the EXO newsletter. And thank you for watching. Until next time, stay well and craft extraordinary outcomes.